Hello, lovely people. I haven't even planned anything to say to introduce this video, so I'm sure it won't escape your attention that we do have a new location. I don't know if this is going to be a permanent location. We're sort of seeing how it turns out, but I have recently moved house, so I'm having to reorganize and reconfigure all of my things and my knitting things and my filming things, and so we'll do some experimentation and we'll see what works. I hope everyone is just as excited for autumn as I am, which is quite substantially. I feel like as much as I love the warm weather, it's not great if you're a knitter. And I feel like I'm now just hitting my stride in terms of autumn dressing. The last couple of weeks have been perfect weather, apart from the rain. Perfect weather. And I'm very, very excited to cast on some new autumnal projects. And I thought for today, because at the beginning of the year, I did do a big 2025 Ravelry Q summary. And I was looking through that video because I needed to remember what I've already talked about when I was planning this one. And it turns out that actually I've made pretty good progress. I think more progress than I thought I might. And I believe in the last one, I didn't even get up to the autumn because January was such a long time ago. So things have changed a lot since then. And we've ticked a lot of exciting projects off the list and added many, many more. So I thought today I'm going to do a bit of an autumnal reset and give you a summary of some of the projects that I hope to make this winter. And autumn, actually, and probably spring, because it'll take me that long. So we'll see. I think we have 11 to talk about today. I'm going to race through them. I'm skipping over anything that I talked about in the last video, which I should be able to put a link to somewhere here, potentially. And if you're interested, then you can go and have a watch of that. There is only a handful, actually, that were covered in that video that I haven't already finished. But they are things that are pretty far up my queue, so they'll definitely be appearing in podcast episodes in the next couple of weeks, I hope, whenever I finish my last summer project, which is driving me insane. But anyway, more on that in a fortnight's time. Ish. I'm not holding myself to anything. So I've grouped everything by sort of clothing category. So I'm going to start with sweaters and jumpers. I think I've got one vest and one top and a couple of accessories. Although I feel like the accessories list, as the weather gets colder, always grows exponentially. So I'm sure that I will come across some more things that I want to make in between now and the start of winter. So the first pattern in the queue is actually something which I already have the yarn for, which is exciting. And it's yarn that I used when I frogged my koi sweater, which I'm not sure anyone will remember because I've not talked about it very much on here. But I sort of repurposed all of the West Yorkshire Spinners Croft Aran that I use for that. And I'm hoping to make this Knitting for Olive pattern, which I'm very fascinated by. As somebody who has never really got into lace work, I actually think my very first sweater project was a lace sweater, of course it was, from a pattern that I picked up in the charity shop that was maybe a 1980s pattern, and I do still have it somewhere. I think it's with my mum at the moment. I've not worn it for quite a long time. But I'm looking forward to getting back into more lace, and this is more complex lace as well, because it's just something that's always passed me by, and I feel like I'd like to be able to tick it off my skills list, if anything. And to be honest, I just loved all the finishes on this jumper. I love the kind of straight, slightly looser sleeves and the fact that the lace pattern kind of tidies up the edges instead of any ribbing. And I think in the cream Aran that I have, it's going to be perfect and probably quite classic in the end. Now, the second jumper will be a surprise to nobody because if you spend any time on Instagram or YouTube or Pinterest, you'll probably see 100 different people knitting this pattern, which is the Norma sweater by My Favourite Things Knitwear. And I know it's really, really popular, but I feel like it's popular for a reason because it's just so cool and there are infinite combinations. I think a three colour project is the perfect number of colours for it to be visually interesting, not a nightmare to work on, and also not to be considered a colour work project like Fair Isle or whatever. I haven't decided what colour palette I'm going to go for with this. Any suggestions welcome. And I'll probably see what is available in my local yarn store, maybe whenever I get around to picking out the yarn for the pattern. I'm not sure quite what I'll do yet. I've always wanted to try the Isaiah because I have never used anything from them, but that's mainly because of the price. And I also don't think there are any stockists near me who sell it in person, so that's also part of the difficulty. If I get to London at some point, I'll have a look in the shops there, and there is definitely a shop in London that stocks it. But yeah, it's just something that's been on my radar for a very long time, and I know that I really wanted to own, but I thought I'll add it to the queue and I'll see where I get to. Because there are a few things which I would like to tidy up before then, and I feel like finishing 6 jumpers in a season is quite a lot, really. I don't think I ever managed to do that many. I can probably do 3 or 4. Anything more will probably get pushed to next year, which is exactly what happened last winter, which is why there are things which are still on my queue that I'm itching to make. So I have seen some great colour combos on the Norma sweater, mainly with navy as the main colour, but I feel like, I mean, obviously, I already own a navy jumper. This is a shop bought one though, which I realise is a bit of a cop out. I'm not going to admit to it. It's very nice though. Charity shop bought. I think I need to have a browse on the Ravelry projects just to see what other people are doing for a bit of inspiration, potentially. If anyone is making this pattern, because I would put money on the fact that people are, please let me know which colours you're using, because that'll be very useful for future me. Now, the third jumper pattern on the list is actually one which I have made before, but I just wasn't really 100% happy with the results. And it's the Coloured Crosses sweater by Anne Wenzel, which is such a cool pattern and makes two-stranded colourwork very accessible, very easy and achievable, which I think I'm big on. I just have issues with the construction of it, which I suppose is why it's beneficial to have made it before and to know that I'd like to do it again. I think my idea is that whenever I have enough double knit scraps, I'd like to choose one colour as the main colour and then use up all my scraps for the different coloured stripes. So I probably won't do the alternating stripe pattern that they have in the pattern, but possibly something a bit more random, or I'll probably see what I have to work with at the end, you know, whenever I do a scrap analysis. I think that my main complaint about this pattern is the fact that it's a raglan, but it's written to be bottom up. And I just cannot for the life of me understand why you do that, because in my mind, I feel like it surely defeats the point of making a raglan jumper. Surely the whole point of a raglan is that it is continuous. And I think if you are knitting the sleeves and the body separately and then switching around all your needles, attaching them together and kind of working up, it just doesn't have the kind of flow that I think I really like. I remember finding it quite irritating when I did it the first time, and I was sort of looking at it going, I just don't see why you couldn't just reverse the order of the pattern instructions and do this top down. There will be a reason. I'm sure there's a reason. I don't know if it will be good enough to convince me to follow the pattern, but I think whenever I attempt this, I'm definitely going to hack it to work it top down and hopefully do a bit of a deep dive in what I changed in case anyone else is interested, because I feel like there are quite a few, especially colourwork raglan patterns, which are written bottom up. And if you have a certain preference for doing them the other direction, then it's useful just to have that information and to hear what other people have done, maybe to find a workaround for it. So when the time comes, hopefully I'll chat about it on here. Now, the last pattern in the sweater section, I already know I'm going to regret it. I don't know why I've done it. I've done it because I like it and it's a great design and it looks like a lot of fun and I know that I'll love it and wear it. But I just don't know if I can face the trauma of having to sit through it for 6 months again. And that would be for the Tulip Pullover by Deegan Knitwear. Lindsay Deegan. I don't know what her designer name is, actually. Um, and I made the flower power pullover last year, and it did nearly kill me, and I did nearly throw it in the bin about 4 times. But that being said, I think in my Ravelry comments on that project, I wrote a bit of an essay of all my complaints and the things that I would change because I was feeling quite passionate about it by the end. And so I feel like giving it a second try, albeit with a different pattern. I'm not sure if the construction of this one is any different. I think it's not. I think I've heard people say that um it's just the intarsia pattern which is different and the shape and construction is the same. So I feel like it would give me a good opportunity to kind of implement all of my learning and make it somewhat a useful experience. And I hate to say it, but the pattern on that one is just too cool for me not to own it. I don't know what colours I'd do yet. I feel like I'm leaning towards blue and pink, but I know that I'm going to have a lot of time to mull that over by the time I get around to making it because it is quite far down the queue. It's more of an aspirational pattern, I think. Whenever I'm in the right headspace and the right yarn presents itself to me, and I feel like it's something that I want to get my teeth into because it is quite a big undertaking, then I'll definitely be excited for it. But until then, yeah, I'm going to sit on it and I'm going to look at it and appreciate all the ones that other people have done first and wait until there's some feedback on that pattern before I attempt it myself, I think. Now, I'm going to move on to the cardigans, and the first cardigan in my list is a very, very, very exciting pattern. So, last Christmas, I received the Rose Knitwear book as a gift, and very guilty, as much as I love it and I loved reading through it, I haven't actually got around to making anything out of it yet. And so before the end of the year, I'm determined that I'm going to make at least one pattern because it would be a shame not to. Because there are so many things in it which are so wonderful and that I would love to make. But again, it's just a matter of having the time. So I'm very, very committed to doing the drift jacket this year. Primarily because whenever I was doing my Pinterest roundup last month, I realised that I am gravitating towards really chunky cable knits and saw this pattern in the book. And it's a pattern that I have known about for a little while because I think it's one of Rose's very, very early patterns. And it's wonderful. And I feel like it's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm also, in terms of my wardrobe, quite low on cardigans and things which button up the front rather than jumpers. So I think it's possibly a perfect middle ground. And for fear of being boring, I might just stick to a nice cream or a natural colour. Mainly because I know that the yarn I really want to use is the Eastex Alafoslopi, which I did use for my Planet sweater earlier in 2025, and I absolutely loved it. And honestly, I could use that yarn for everything. It's my favourite. It's probably the only chunky yarn that I'll ever use going forward because it wears so well and it's so nice to work with. And mind your house is covered in fluff for 4 months afterwards, but it's well worth it because I think it's just got such a beautiful texture and finish, and the colour range is wonderful. So, and they also stock it in my local yarn store up the road. So I'm definitely going to go in, have a browse, see which colours I'm thinking about. I think for a while I was leaning towards maybe a dark red or a burgundy, but I think I need to see how I feel and see how it would work in terms of my wardrobe because I don't own that many cardigans. But yeah, very excited to make the drift jacket. It's using super bulky yarn on 8mm needles. So I would like to think that it knits up quite quickly, but I think it's quite a substantial piece, so the yardage is probably quite high. So, I suppose. Now, another one of my goals for the year, which is possibly not achievable and maybe will turn into a New Year's resolution for next year, is to finish a Fair Isle project. I would just love a really, really classic Fair Isle project of any description because I've started a couple in the past and I've just never really managed to finish them. I think I really struggle to find patterns which are exactly what I'm looking for in all the design elements. And I'm definitely not knowledgeable enough to go about altering all over colourwork, Fair Isle or stranded knitting patterns. And I'm also especially frightened of steeking because I have never done it before. But I think now is the time to change. I have seen this pattern, which I believe was published by Cascade Yarns, the company, and it's called the Azure Woods Cardigan. I have a feeling it's quite an old pattern, actually. But there are definitely some things that I would probably do differently. This one is steeked, as you would probably need to with all Fair Isle cardies. I think I'd definitely use a proper Fair Isle yarn for it because I've used a lot of Jameson and Smith and Jamesons of Shetland 2-ply in the past. And I feel like theirs are just so perfect for that style, it would be a shame not to use them. I'm slightly intimidated by it because it would be quite a challenge, but I know that it's something that I've just always wanted to own. And again, this year we're filling gaps in the cardi repertoire because it's significantly lacking. I don't need more jumpers. I will make more jumpers, but you know, they're not important right now. I would love to hear people's advice on steeking, even if it's not a project that I get round to before the end of the year. But I do have a sewing machine. I do quite a lot of sewing, so I'm happy to sew. I know some people like to crochet their steeks. I'm sure there are other ways, needle felting, that type of thing. I know all of this information is available online, but if anyone is particularly passionate about a certain method, then I'd love to hear it. So please leave a comment if you've got some advice for me. Now, this next pattern is definitely a recent addition, I think just in the last week or so, but one of my very, very kind commenters who responded to a question that I asked in the last video about recommendations for a brioche cardi pattern. Somebody recommended the Coastal Cardigan by Knits for Days, which is the most perfect pattern and is exactly what I was looking for. So that is very exciting, and I may finally get one step closer to owning the red brioche cardigan of my dreams, which I'm thinking might be a perfect Christmas project. I know red for Christmas, how original. I don't care. It's a classic. There are a couple of things about this pattern. I don't think I'd need to really change anything construction-wise. The gauge of the original is quite open because I'm pretty sure it's on 4.5mm needles, but it only uses 2 strands of mohair. So it's quite light and airy, and I know that I would want to make something a bit heavier and more substantial. But I feel like the pattern would very, very easily translate to either a double knit or an Aran weight, possibly held with a mohair. And then I get the best of both worlds of not having to self-draft a pattern and also get something that's a bit more suitable for the winter. But I just think this is perfect in all respects. It's got the nice wide raglan increases, which I was really looking for, and a round collar. And potentially I might make the button band a little bit wider, depending on how complicated that is. I don't know anything about the pattern's construction yet, so that would be just something to think about potentially in the future. But I am very committed to this because it has been sat on my Pinterest board for a very long time. And so hopefully by the end of the year, that might be a great Christmas holidays project, I feel. And thank you very much to the person who left that below the other video because I'm sorry I can't remember who it is right now, but just know I am eternally grateful. Now we're back to a classic, and I don't really talk about petite knit a lot here because I feel like I can't really add anything to the conversation that other people aren't already saying. But I do occasionally make a petite knit pattern, and I have had a failed experiment with the cloud blouse last year. But I've decided that since I've bought the pattern and I own the pattern, it would be a shame not to attempt it again. And the other thing which I have is a substantial quantity of mohair scraps, which need a home. So I think to switch things up a little bit, in the colder months, if I don't feel like working on a sweater or a cardigan, a cloud blouse might be the perfect thing. And I'm quite excited about using up the scraps that I have, which were used for a project earlier in the summer, and creating some kind of stripe pattern similar to this pin from Pinterest. Just using up what I have, but possibly pairing colours together and then maybe alternating stripe sections. I don't quite know how I'd do it yet, but I think it'll definitely be something fun and stripy and scrappy, and hopefully more on gauge than the last attempt, which didn't go very well at all. And there were a couple of learning points as well in that process that will be very useful going forward. I knew at the time that I had to make the armholes much wider. I needed to change the gauge on the neckline, stop it gaping so much, just little picky things like that. But I actually think it's a very cute piece. And I don't own many knitted blouses or tops, so I think it would be a great addition. And now it'll be no surprise to anyone that I have another rose pattern on the queue. It's not even the last one, I'll tell you that. Call me a super fan. But this is actually a project that I have made in the past, and I don't know where it went. I feel like I might have given it away to someone and forgotten about it. But I've realised that I would like to make another one and keep it this time and possibly do it differently to the other one. So this is the wave vest, which was one of the first patterns that I ever followed, I think. I made it just after I made my off-grid sweater. I think because Rose was one of the only designers that I knew about at the time, and so I just looked through her back catalogue. And I made it in a brown and cream, but I feel like this time I would definitely like a more fun and funky colour combo. Possibly something quite 70s, I don't know. Maybe that's a bit too experimental. But I think it's actually a great pattern and it should work up fairly quickly, especially with the looped stitch. Is a lot of fun and is very interesting and engaging. And again, I also just don't own many jumper vests, and I feel like it would be quite a useful thing to have since I do work in an office and I do have to wear a suit occasionally. It'll spice up my corporate dress marginally, maybe. But this is just knit with double knit yarn, no mohair or anything. So there's kind of infinite opportunity, I think, for experimentation. Now we're on to our little accessory section, which I'm going to whiz through because there's a chance that some of these are aspirational. And also, I feel like I've been chatting for quite a long time. So we've got two hats on the list. The first hat is a hat called Blomstra by Kaiser Vorela Fredriksson. I'm so sorry. It's a very, very beautiful floral hat pattern with kind of a vine motif as well. And it's just, again, two-colour intarsia all the way through. And I know that the recommended yarn for this is Rauma Final, which I actually have some that I'm hoping to cast on very, very soon. And so I may have some scraps at some point. And I think I understand why, because it definitely needs a really toothy yarn to get the intarsia to work well for a hat. But I just think it's such a cute pattern. Do I need another beanie? Probably not. There's a good chance actually that I might make this for a gift for somebody if there are winter birthdays coming up. But again, it's just been sat on my queue for a very long time, and I think it's a really beautiful take on something which can be quite monotonous and repetitive, like a beanie. But if you want to spruce it up a little bit, that's a perfect one. Now, the last rose pattern of the day, no surprise to everyone, is the Orbit hat, which unfortunately I don't think it exists in the book that was published, but I will absolutely just buy the PDF pattern because I think it's such a wonderful design. And it's also the perfect opportunity for me to use up the last remaining oddments from my Planet sweater of Eastex Alafos have a kind of dark blue and a chartreuse sort of lime green that I think will go perfectly together for this, and I have just the right quantity. And I know that chunkier beanies are not for everyone, and you know, they're not entirely practical all the time. But one thing that I have learned recently after moving to Bristol is that I'm doing a lot more cycling than I ever was. And as the weather gets colder, I know that it's going to be exponentially more freezing on the bike every single day. So I'm kind of prepping for the future in that way. And I feel like this is something which I'm going to move up the queue and make sooner rather than later, just because with it being super chunky and on quite large needles, I think it'll work up really quickly. And hopefully I'll get a lot of use out of it as the weather gets a bit chillier too. And again, I totally lied, and it wasn't even the last rose pattern that I was going to talk about, because the last rose pattern that I was going to talk about is this one now, which is the static mittens. The one thing which I've never managed to bring myself to knit is actually a pair of gloves. And I think it's because the idea of knitting fingers individually sounds extremely tedious. So I think a mitten is the way to go. And I also don't necessarily mind wearing mittens. I know some people are really funny about having all of their fingers attached to each other, not being free to move, which I understand. But I just think that this pattern is so much fun and will be a perfect way to use up any scraps that I have in the right weight. I think they're double knit. Yes, in two colours. So as the time arises when I might be needing gloves and proper scarf weather starts, this is definitely one that I'm quite excited to do. And I suppose in a way I'll just be interested to try out a glove and see what the construction is like. If anyone has any advice for making gloves that fit well and are comfortable, then again, I'm asking a lot of you today. Please drop it below. So I have now just realised that by the end of the video, I've come to be sat in the dark. So possibly this is not going to be a filming location for the long run. But that being said, September is my new year, and I'm very excited to have a bit of a fresh start and have lots of new plans. Hopefully, in the next podcast update, we'll have a couple of new cast-ons from this list. So there'll be a lot more to talk about then, and it's just reaching my favourite time of year, and I'm very, very excited about it. I hope everyone is having a lovely time. Please let me know if you have started planning your autumnal or winter projects, because I'm always interested to see what people are making and inevitably add more things to the queue that I'll not have time to get around to. But that being said, I appreciate everything and I love reading everyone's comments, so go for it. So I hope everyone has a lovely week and you have lots of exciting things coming up, but also lots of time to relax and slow down after the summer and get started on some nice wintry knitting or crochet projects. And hopefully I'll chat to you very, very soon.